What if I told you there was once a Roman emperor who was worshipped as a god, dressed as a bride, forced senators to watch human sacrifices, and turned the imperial palace into a brothel? No, this isn't a myth. This was real. His name was Elagabalus, and Rome tried to erase him from history. He was just 14 years old when he took the throne, and what followed was a reign soaked in scandal, chaos, and blood, the kind of story you'd think came from a fever dream. But every bit of it was recorded by terrified Roman historians who didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or beg the gods for mercy. This is the beginning of the most bizarre chapter in the Roman Empire. Elagabalus wasn't even Roman by origin. He was born in Emesa, modern-day Syria, around the year 203 AD. His real name was Varius Avitus Bassianus. His family were high priests of the sun god Elagabal, a mysterious Eastern deity represented by a black conical meteorite, believed to have fallen from the sky. By the age of 12, Elagabalus was already serving as high priest, performing sacred rituals dressed in gold robes and jewels, dancing around the altar. The people of Emesa didn't just respect him, they worshipped him. He was seen as the earthly vessel of the sun god himself. But the real twist? His mother, Julia Soaemias, was no ordinary Roman woman. She belonged to the Severan dynasty, and her aunt was Julia Domna, the wife of Emperor Septimius Severus. So when the emperor died and power passed down to his sons, Rome was thrown into chaos. It was a storm of ambition, blood, and betrayal. And Julia Soaemias was ready to play her part. She wasn't just a mother. She was a strategist, a manipulator, and a queen in waiting. Her goal was clear: put her son on the throne of the most powerful empire in the world. After the assassination of Emperor Caracalla, the throne was seized by the cruel and unpopular Macrinus. The people hated him. The military despised him. And Julia Soaemias saw her moment. She spread a wild but effective rumor that her son Elagabalus was the illegitimate child of Caracalla, and therefore the rightful emperor. The story was a lie, but it didn't matter. The Eastern legions were loyal to Caracalla's memory. When Julia placed the sun god's black stone on a platform beside her 14-year-old son and declared him the new emperor, the soldiers fell to their knees. It was a coronation not of Rome, but of a god in human form. The soldiers hailed him as imperator, and coins were struck with his face before he ever saw the Roman Senate. In their eyes, he was divine. In 218 AD, Macrinus was defeated at the Battle of Antioch. His forces crumbled, and his head was sent as a gift to Julia, sealed in a box, a grotesque token of triumph. Elagabalus, the boy god, was declared emperor of Rome. At just 14, he was about to enter the lion's den. From the moment Elagabalus entered the city, Rome was horrified and fascinated. He brought with him the meteorite idol, which he installed in a lavish new temple called the Elagabalium, forcing senators to worship it as the supreme god, even above Jupiter. He wore makeup, dyed his hair, and dressed in silk and gold like an Eastern queen. At festivals, he would appear in public dressed as Venus, claiming to be the goddess reincarnated. He replaced Rome's sacred rituals with his own sun cult. He married 5 women, including a Vestal virgin, an unthinkable act of sacrilege. But in private, it was said he preferred men, especially soldiers. One man he called his husband and demanded to be addressed as the empress. His dinners were orgies. His palace became a place of debauchery, where nobles were forced to watch sadistic games, naked dancers, and exotic rituals. Elagabalus reportedly invented new dishes daily, serving guests meals made of peacock tongues, camel heels, and gold flakes. If a senator hesitated, they risked being fed to the animals kept in the imperial gardens. He released snakes into banquet halls just to watch guests scream. He gave away gifts at random: chariots, houses, or rotting carcasses. No one ever knew whether they'd receive a fortune or a curse. He even built a mechanical contraption to shower guests with petals, one so overwhelming that some were suffocated to death beneath the weight of flowers. The Senate grew terrified. The people whispered. Even the army began to regret their choice. But Elagabalus didn't care. He was living not as a man, but as a god. And gods don't follow rules. They burn them. He declared that the Roman pantheon must bow before Elagabal, the Eastern sun god. He planned to move the sacred relics of Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva to his temple, declaring them as consorts to his meteorite. His rule wasn't just madness, it was religious war. And yet, behind the silk curtains of the palace, betrayal was already taking shape. Not from outside, but from within his own bloodline. Julia Maesa, his grandmother, the very woman who put him on the throne, was preparing someone new. A boy named Alexander, young, disciplined, Roman in manner. A prince she believed Rome could finally accept. The trap had been set. If you're enjoying the story, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to HistoryMind, because what's coming next gets even darker. When you believe you're a god, you stop fearing consequences. But in Rome, even gods bleed. We watched a teenage boy from Syria ascend the Roman throne, not as a man, but as a deity. He wore silk like an empress, forced senators to worship a black meteorite, and declared war on Rome's oldest traditions. But now, the sun is setting on the boy god. Whispers have become plans, allies have become enemies, and the trap is almost ready to snap shut. Let's return to the madness before it all burns. Even after the scandal of marrying a Vestal virgin and calling a soldier his husband, Elagabalus wasn't finished shocking Rome. He declared that every religion, every god, must bow before Elagabal, the sun deity. To prove it, he ordered the sacred fire of the Vestals moved to his temple. He placed Roman gods like Jupiter and Minerva beneath his meteorite idol, symbolically making them servants. He even claimed that his god Elagabal would marry the goddess Urania, combining Syrian mysticism with Roman astrology, all under one cult. Senators were horrified, but they obeyed, because anyone who didn't vanished. He forced the senators to attend bizarre festivals where sacred Roman relics were paraded through the streets beside symbols of Eastern deities. In one ceremony, he danced before the imperial court wearing nothing but a veil of gold and jewels, claiming it was an ancient rite. He laughed as they watched in silence. His private quarters turned into temples of vice. Night after night, rituals were held where wine flowed like blood, and blood often flowed like wine. Behind the golden curtains of the palace, Elagabalus indulged in darker obsessions. He hosted gladiator games where the losers weren't spared, even when begging for mercy. He watched mutilations as if they were art. He built traps inside banquet halls, collapsing ceilings, false floors, wild animals hidden behind doors. He didn't do this for punishment, he did it for pleasure. He believed pain was divine. Elagabalus commissioned rare poisons from Egypt, only to test them on slaves. He hired magicians, necromancers, and castrated boys to perform in nightly rituals. Even his advisors began wearing amulets and charms, not to please him, but to survive him. Rome was being ruled by fear, and fear, like a cracked statue, doesn't stand forever. The emperor passed laws that no one could predict. One morning, he declared all noble women must attend court in transparent robes. The next, he outlawed beards. He taxed perfumes but gave away pearls. He crucified a man for not clapping hard enough at a play. It was madness pretending to be order. Julia Maesa, the grandmother who once crowned Elagabalus, was watching him closely. She knew Rome would not endure this chaos, so she turned to her other grandson, Alexander Severus. He was the opposite of Elagabalus. Disciplined, Roman in dress and manner, quiet, respectful of tradition. Julia began preparing him quietly. She whispered into the ears of generals. She offered bribes to the Praetorian Guard. She began building a shadow empire. Elagabalus sensed the betrayal. He tried to have Alexander removed, but the soldiers refused. They admired the boy. More importantly, they trusted Julia Maesa. For the first time, Elagabalus realized he was no longer the god they feared. He was just a boy again, a boy surrounded by knives. One night, in a final attempt to regain control, Elagabalus summoned the Senate and declared Alexander unfit. He demanded the soldiers execute him. Instead, they rose and walked out. The next morning, Elagabalus found his palace surrounded. He ran with his mother, Julia Soaemias, into a side room of the imperial compound. Desperate, afraid. It didn't matter. The Praetorian Guard broke in. They killed him in the corner of a latrine. His body was dragged through the streets, spat on, mutilated. The people screamed with joy. His corpse was thrown into the Tiber River, erased from memory. Rome had erased emperors before, but this time it erased a god. If you found this story as wild and shocking as it truly is, please comment your thoughts, and subscribe to HistoryMind, because next, we'll uncover the aftershocks of a reign so twisted, Rome itself tried to forget it ever happened. The body was gone, the palace was scrubbed, the sun cult temple sealed shut, but something lingered in Rome's air. A tension, like the scent after lightning. Rome wanted to forget Elagabalus, wipe his name, smash his statues, burn his records. But how do you erase someone who burned so brightly? What came next wasn't silence. It was a haunting. A legacy carved not in marble but in whispers. The echoes of Rome's maddest emperor didn't die with him. They just went underground. This is the final act. Not of his reign, but of the memory that refused to die. After the murder, the Senate acted swiftly. A decree was passed. Damnatio Memoriae, the condemnation of memory. All coins with Elagabalus's face were melted. His portraits were torn from walls. Statues were smashed, inscriptions chiseled out. Temples he built were defiled. His sun cult priests were scattered or executed. Even the very name Elagabalus became poison. Official records renamed him Various. His god, Elagabal, was tossed aside like a broken relic. Rome wanted to pretend he never happened. But history isn't a scroll you can burn. It's a scar. Alexander Severus, his cousin and successor, was everything Elagabalus was not. He reinstated old Roman customs, restored the traditional pantheon, and purged the court of any trace of his cousin's eccentricities. He was young, but ruled with the help of his grandmother, Julia Maesa, the same woman who once backed Elagabalus. She died a year later, content that Rome had returned to order. But even with peace restored, there was unease. No one forgot how close the empire had come to religious collapse, moral decay, and absolute humiliation. In private, senators whispered stories of the boy priest emperor. Some feared the gods had been offended by his rituals. Earthquakes, plagues, and military rebellions in the years after his death were blamed by some on divine revenge. But here's the twist, buddy. The cult of Elagabalus didn't vanish. In the east, in Emesa and parts of Syria, the black meteorite was still worshipped by locals. Priests who escaped the purge carried the traditions in secret. Fragments of the sun god's rituals were absorbed into later Eastern mystery religions. Some scholars argue traces of the Elagabal cult influenced early Gnostic sects. And in Rome itself, underground circles of mystics began quietly referencing the sun's divine flame, a hidden nod to the forgotten god. Even centuries later, medieval texts would refer to a boy who claimed the stars as his crown, believed by some to be Elagabalus. His name survived, not in honor, but in infamy. In modern times, Elagabalus has become a subject of fascination. Historians debated, was he mad or misunderstood? Some see him as a tyrant who mocked Rome's values and destroyed its dignity. Others view him as a tragic figure, a young priest forced into a role he never wanted, clashing with a world that couldn't accept him. In LGBTQ history, some consider Elagabalus one of the earliest figures to express gender fluidity and same-sex relationships in a position of power. His request for sex reassignment surgery, documented by Roman writers, shocked ancient scribes but intrigued modern scholars. Was he ahead of his time or simply lost in it? The truth is, Elagabalus may never be fully understood, because he wasn't just an emperor. He was a paradox, both a warning and a prophecy. Thank you for following this strange, dark, and unforgettable story. If it made you think or feel or even just go, then do one thing. Like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to HistoryMind. Because history isn't just about facts, it's about the madness we try to forget, and the stories that refuse to die.